Hello out there, and today I have a modification video for you today. A couple new things that I finished working on, and then some updates for some other knives that I will definitely get into. And if you've never seen one of my modification videos, the point of all of these is to share the results, sure, but also there are just a ton of obstacles and variables that come up anytime I'm doing a modification, and I really like to share that stuff with you because I know that there are people out there who are getting into this stuff that can definitely use the information to avoid some of the struggles that I have. You know, I'm strictly an amateur when it comes to this. Sometimes I do get some results that I'm really happy with, but there are just a lot of problems and mistakes that I make and just situations that I encounter that when I was getting into it, if I would have had some of this information, I could have avoided some needless time wasted. We'll say that. So that's sort of the point of all these videos. I think it's a lot of fun just to share the results and then talk about some of the issues. So that's what we're going to do today. I actually wanted to do this video a couple weeks in the future, but this Tenacious, I had some more things I needed to share with you about it, and it has to get into the mail to get to the winner of the giveaway. So by the time you're watching this, it actually is already on the way. So there is that. But let's just get into the final new stuff first, and we'll talk about this Kershaw Dimension. And first of all, I just want to say this Dimension is a really cool design. All right, it's cool. There are some really interesting nuances about it and some things that really make me want to do a full review of this model. You know, so I will eventually do that. One thing that you can't change when it comes to modifications are just the lines of the knife, and I think it's gorgeous. So again, I will be doing a full review at some point. But if you're looking at this knife and maybe you remember a Dimension modification that I did about 6 months ago, this one is a little bit more quiet. You know, the knife that I did in the past was a knife for a viewer, and I did an acid etch on the blade in addition to the heat ano on the titanium. And while I really liked the result that I got, one of the things I'm trying to focus on all of my modifications is to just keep it as simple as I can and keep it from getting too noisy. You know, if the focus of the knife is supposed to be on you know, the titanium here and this heat ano, then let's keep the rest of it as simple as we can. You know, so that's why I didn't even touch the blade at all. All I did, apart from the heat ano, was polish all of the hardware. And then with the heat ano, obviously with the titanium, you have to remove the coating. And then I got some nice bronze and blue on this side, and some bronze, blue, purple on the other. So it worked out really well. This one is for my collection and for me to keep personally. So yeah, this is really the way that I would want the knife to be. But again, just letting the handle here be the centerpiece and not doing too much. You know, that's one of the things that I've erred in before, is just making too loud and noisy a knife, and it ends up just looking sloppy. And so here, just a more focused objective, and I think it worked out well, even though, you know, it's not too flashy and not going to win any awards, but it's just what I wanted it to be. So moving on to my Spyderco Ambitious. All right, and you might have seen this knife before because I had previously done just the regular tiger stripe acid etch over the satin blade, and I had the stock G10 handle scale on the knife. And it was the first tiger stripe etch that I ever did, and I came across this dealer online who was selling scales. You know, I don't have the capability to really make scales myself. The most high-tech tool that I have is a Dremel, so everything is by hand. You know, so being able to really shape scales with any type of precision is sort of outside of my area of expertise and ability at this point. So I saw these scales, like $25. I'll bring in the gentleman's business card, called Quinn Carve Designs. All right, and they were, I think, $25 or $30 shipped, which is pretty cheap for a set of scales. And I just thought they were gorgeous. So I wanted to pick them up and get them on my knife. And one thing I will say is that the fit and finish on them was not great. You know, I did have to sand them down, and it took me probably about 45 minutes to really shape them exactly the way that I wanted them to be, you know, because they weren't flush with the liners. But even so, you know, at that price point and being able to do with them what I did, I do think it's a pretty darn good deal, especially because the pattern on them and the work here is really nice. All right, so I threw those on there, polished the knife up, and then also added that second layer of acid etch to the knife, and then acid washed the whole thing. So really happy with the way this came out. I think that second layer and the acid stone wash contrasts really nicely with the scales here. And while I was nervous about messing with my first ever tiger stripe etch, I'm certainly happy that the results I got make it a pretty cool looking knife. All right, so there is that one. All right, and now let's get into just a real quick update about this Kershaw Chill. You might remember I removed the bead blast from this knife because I just don't care for bead blasts, and I polished everything up. And one of the viewers in the comments of that video said, why don't you anodize it and put a little color in it? And I figured, you know, why not? It's a really easy knife to take apart and deal with, so it wouldn't be a really big project. And I just did a quick heat ano on the clip, gave it a little bit of bronze and purple, like a rose gold look almost. And then the same thing on the liners. So bronze, a little bit of purple, maybe you can see that, just depending on the light that you have, you know, it sort of jumps out. So nothing too crazy and fancy, but a fun way to sort of make it your own. And if you don't have a Kershaw Chill, very few knives at the sub $20 price point that I can recommend more highly than this. So good little knife. All right, and now let's get into the other follow-ups and updates, starting with this Tenacious. You know, this Tenacious has been an interesting one. It's been a fun one to do, and I did have some pretty big issues with it, though. And if you watched the giveaway video a week or so ago, I was saying that, hey, I still have to touch this knife up, and there's a couple fine-tuning adjustments that I have to make before the giveaway ends. Well, the giveaway ended, and I hadn't made any progress on it. And the big issue that I was having was that there was side-to-side blade play. I couldn't figure it out. You know, I bought this knife lightly used, and when I got it, I immediately took it apart because I was planning on getting these scales. So as soon as the scales came in the mail, you know, I slapped them on and, you know, finished the custom work and you know, put it back together. And I kept having this side-to-side issue. And I was thinking it was me, you know, I thought maybe it was the acid etch. I'd done something wrong and etched the blade too deeply, or the scales were too thick. That's what the real focus was. I thought that the scales were too thick and that the pivot wasn't able to completely lock into each other, and that was causing the knife to move around on the inside. And I kept taking the knife apart and tinkering with it and trying to come up with like the best way to get that fixed, you know, sanding around the pivot, trying to make it more flush. All these things, you know, and my focus was in exactly the wrong direction. I was thinking about the wrong thing the whole time, because eventually I just took the knife completely apart and I had all the pieces lined up and I was just staring at them trying to figure out the answer, and I realized that the washers just weren't right. They just looked wrong, and I'd probably seen them a dozen times since I'd picked up the knife, but I never really noticed that, and so I pulled up on YouTube a disassembly video for the Kershaw Tenacious, and I realized that the washers that were in the knife were the wrong ones. That for some reason, whoever had owned this knife before me changed the washers out. No idea why, but what they're supposed to be on this Tenacious are two washers, two bronze washers on each side. And what I had was one on each side, and it was a really thin one, and so it was creating a gap that should have been filled to keep the knife from having side-to-side play. So thankfully, you know, every time I have a scrap knife or I screw something up or have to get rid of a knife, I always keep all of the pieces of old knives, and over the course of time I've accumulated a lot of parts, and so I had a couple extra washers that I could throw on this knife. You know, the Tenacious also has a pretty standard pivot size, so a lot of washers will fit this one. And so that was pretty easy, and when I put it back together, lo and behold, no play. But the real focus and the point, I guess, of this knife is that buying used knives, there's a lot of things you can't tell from the pictures. And this is not the first time that a used knife has sort of tricked me that way, you know, with things that weren't there that should have been, or that were there that shouldn't have been. You know what I mean? When it comes to the component. So definitely something to keep in mind, and it's always smart, always, to just pull up a tutorial video, a disassembly video, if you have a popular model that you're working on, because there are tons of them on YouTube, and they're really good information as far as the best way to take apart the knife and put it back together, but also making sure the pieces that you have are the ones that you should have. So there's that. This one's good to go. At this point, like I said, already on the way, maybe even in the hands of the person who won it. And last but not least today, I just want to give a quick update about this CRKT Vigil. All right, the Vizzle scale, if you remember from a previous video, I had had a mess up on it, and there was a mark on the bronze ano that I did. And so I just decided to take the ano off and sort of use this as an experimental scale. And I think eventually I will try to do something cohesive here and get a good finished product to put back on the knife, because I still really like that knife. And that's definitely something that's possible, even though I have done a lot of other work since then. But you can see I'm experimenting with some transitions, some layering transitions from like a polished scale to an acid etch to the acid etch with the bronze ano beneath it. You know, and it's stuff that I've done before, but the thing that I've never done before was anodize something that had already been acid etched. And so if you see this line right here, that line actually signifies the spot where the acid etch begins. So this bar right here is just the standard scale with the standard ano that I did, and then from here over is the ano after an acid etch. Now, if you were going to try to do that, you really have to polish the knife up before you do the ano after the acid etch, because the acid makes it, you know, pretty dirty, and you have to try to clean it up and get it as polished as possible to get the best result. But it's possible, and I didn't know that going into this. So just really, really interesting, and it opens up a lot of doors. The fact that I can acid etch something and then ano it is pretty darn exciting. So it's something I'm going to think about and definitely use in the future with some other jobs. So really excited about what the potential is because of this scale and what I learned from it. All right, so yeah, I do have some other things coming up in the future that I'm working on. A new jettison that I'm doing for Jacob, a buddy of mine. He's working on one for me, and I'm going to be working on one for him. So that's really exciting. I've got another amicus that I'm working on, and I will explain why in a future video. And then finally, I am doing a Pilar for myself. I think I've modified like 4 or 5 Pilars, and I actually have one that is going to be mine. And so I'm going to be working on that as well. So a lot of updates on some CRKT mods, which is pretty exciting. So that stuff will be coming in the future. That's basically what we've got for you today, though. So any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, let me know in the feedback down below. Always happy to hear from you. Appreciate your time, and I will be talking with you soon. My next video will be 2 new Benchmades, discontinued ones. Exciting stuff. So thanks for watching, and take care. Have a good one.